49-year-old day laborer in Southern California has seen this happen before. Work also ground to a halt after the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. But Lopez says this time is different. The virus is invisible, he says, and we're at risk. It's a ghost behind us. Even so, Lopez says he can't afford not to work. This week he helped to do some repairs at a restaurant and went to Home Depot to get materials. I have to take the risk, he says. I had to go wearing gloves, a mask, glasses. Groups that advocate for immigrant workers say stories like this are playing out across the country. Many are raising money for emergency funds to help those with no safety net. There is a crisis moment for hundreds of thousands of undocumented workers and families that don't have any sort of basic work protections, like sick leave, like unemployment insurance, says Sarmiento of the National Day Laborer Organizing Network. Lopez says he has enough money for 2 or 3 more days, and after that he's not sure what the future holds. But he knows he won't be getting any money from the government to help. Instead, he'll be turning to his friends and adapting however he can. That's what we do. We have to stick together, he says. We have to turn to each other. Now, this story is really serious, and it's interesting that they mentioned the Numbers USA guys' take on it, because it's important to have that perspective in there and to see how people are describing it, at least. I don't know if this is how he's thinking about it, actually, but this is how he's describing it to others, and it may represent a kind of thinking that people have. This, well, we should take care of our own people first, and it's not our job to take care of these other people, and besides, they're covered. Medical care providers will test and treat patients regardless of immigration status. Okay, that's akin to the argument that, well, people don't need health insurance because no matter who you are, whether you have insurance or not, if you have an emergency, you go to the emergency room and they'll take care of you. True, as far as it goes. What it doesn't account for, and what is left out of that argument, is the fact that somebody has to pay for all of that. That if you wait till you have an emergency to get treatment, your health outcomes are going to be much, much worse. So you're talking about people being very, very sick and or possibly and probably dying because they don't have any other way of getting help earlier. And you're leaving out the fact that these people have to have a place to live, they have to have food. And before any of the naysayers say it, they're here. They're here right now. It's easy to say, well, they should have been here in the first place, blah, blah, blah. We've heard all that kind of argument before, and that is all well and good in this grand scheme of things. Like if you want to stand back and look at the big picture and say, well, if you're here without documentation, you are not here legally, you, quote unquote, shouldn't be here, and therefore all these things, ways of being helped and all these necessities of life, you don't deserve them because you're not supposed to be here. Well, that's an argument about what, ethics, morality, something like that. I mean, that's way up in the air. That is not real people, real situations in real life. That's ignoring the reality of people's situation and talking about it in big impersonal ways. But the reality is that millions of people are here right now. They're living in our communities. They have been working in our communities. When you go out to eat, a lot of these people have been making your food, serving your food, cleaning up your mess after you leave. When you get work done on your house, that great deal that you got from the company last time that you're like, wow, that was a good deal. I'm glad I could afford this work getting done. A lot of the people doing that work were immigrants, and some of them were undocumented. It goes on and on and on. There are a lot of things that these people have been doing and are doing that you have been depending on for your lifestyle. And so these people live in your community. They have families, they have friends, they shop in your stores, they buy things, they employ other people, they do a lot of things, and they are an important part of the economy, our economy, your community. And to just suddenly go, oh, well, these are tough times, so I guess somebody has to be on the short end of the stick, and it's going to be those guys. Well, what you let happen to them will come back to bite you in some way, if only in your health situation, if nothing else. If you're putting people in the situation where they have to do dangerous things in order to survive, they're going to do them. I mean, it's easy for someone like me, for example. I get to stay home. I get to go, oh, okay, you know what? It's not good out there. I'm closing down my place of employment. I'm just going to socially distance for a while. And I'm okay. I have money. My bills are getting paid. My food is being bought. All the things that I need, I have. I'm a little stir crazy sometimes because I'm not seeing anybody. I haven't been closer than like 10 feet from anyone in quite a while. But if I had to keep working somehow in order to continue to have a roof over my head or to be fed, I would have to do it. I mean, I'm not going to just sit there and quietly starve to death in a field because I've been thrown out of my apartment and I can't afford to buy food. I'm going to go, oh, well, I don't want to infect anybody else if I get sick, so I'm just going to go out into some farmer's field and starve to death, and then I'll be part of his, landscaping or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. I was going to say something horrible, but I'm not going to. But, I mean, nobody's going to do that. No one realistically is going to do that any more than Grandma is going to offer herself up to be a victim for the sake of the economy, which some people have been saying should happen. Oh, we should just reopen our economy because it's too hard to lose money, and what are a few lives when we're talking about losing millions of dollars? So you have that kind of thinking, and that kind of thinking also leads to people like this Chris Chemensky or whatever his name is that we should take care of our own first, and don't worry about those people. They can go get medical treatment regardless of their status. Well, maybe they can't. But can you go to the store and buy food regardless of whether you have money? Can you stay in your apartment regardless of whether you pay your rent? I mean, can you continue to have power if you don't pay your power bill? I mean, all these things, these people need to keep doing those things in order to survive. So simply saying that the aid package includes funding for medical care providers is not saying that you are taking care of people that need help. So I want to push back very strongly on this and say that we have a lot of undocumented people in this country, millions and millions and millions of them. Whether they should be here or not is not the question. They are here. They need help just like everybody else does, and they're not getting it from this stimulus package, and they're going to need it sooner or later somehow. So either from charity, you and me giving money to whoever needs it, or something. But somebody needs to help. And I can't stress that strongly enough. Okay, let me move on here. I don't want to keep going on and on about these things. Ah, my voice. Arg. It's so frustrating. Okay. Our next article, entitled Legal Immigrants at Risk of Losing Status During Coronavirus Pandemic. Well, here's another problem that immigrants are facing. Thousands of people with legal status in the United States could inadvertently violate immigration law over the next few months, as the government agency that processes applications remains closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Attorneys, think tanks, activists, and United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, the agency that issues work permits and naturalizations to foreign nationals, have put forward some proposals to plug holes in existing immigration law, but potentially millions remain at risk. Times of crisis point out the failures in the system we've got, and one of the failures in our immigration system is it's not responsive to crises, period, said Teresa Cardinal Brown, Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. A main concern for immigration attorneys are foreign nationals whose work permits are about to expire, whether they plan to request an extension or leave the country. USCIS, a largely paper-based organization, has suspended in-person service until at least April 1st to protect its staff, contractors, and prospective applicants from contagion. The immediate and most pressing concern for our members and employees is ensuring individuals whose status is expiring have means and measures to remain lawfully, says Shavari Daledana, Director of Government Relations at the American Immigration Lawyers Association. In a letter Monday to Ken Cuccinelli, there's that guy again, the USCIS senior official, and I'll remind you he is not there appointed correctly, and he's, in fact, it's been stated that his appointment is illegal and he should not be in that position, but amazingly he is there performing the duties of the director. AILI demanded the agency freeze all deadlines as of Friday, threatening litigation if the agency does not comply. Cuccinelli holds the top job at USCIS and the number 2 post at the Department of Homeland Security, both as a senior official performing duties as he has not been put forward by President Trump for Senate confirmation. And you know why? Because he can't get it. Anyway, you're putting people into a catch-22. You're being forced to jeopardize your health and the health of those around you to file things in a timely way, or you're violating immigration law, Daledana said. DHS has ample authority to suspend deadlines and prolong work authorizations, according to Ur Jadoo, former chief counsel for USCIS. They have tremendous authority to extend those periods of authorized stay inside the United States and the associated work authorization, said Jadoo, the director of DHS Watch, an immigration policy oversight project at progressive advocacy group America's Voice. A USCIS spokesman said the agency is considering a number of options for people who are unable to leave the United States after their work permits have expired, and highlighted the agency's ability to provide special consideration and expedited processing on a case-by-case basis. Brown said USCIS could issue extensions for work permits, including for beneficiaries of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, otherwise known as DACA, but the Byzantine nature of the immigration system could still complicate many cases. And Brown warned against any push to relitigate immigration reform in Congress during a time of crisis. Right now, we need to focus on the immediate needs and what's pragmatic. I believe what we need to do for immigration right now is just maintain the status quo, she said. Some Democrats pushed for a permanent legislative replacement for the DACA program in the House coronavirus stimulus package, but that language was not adopted in the Democratic draft legislation published Monday. The Democratic proposal did include a provision forcing USCIS to automatically extend status of or work authorization to all immigrants whose permits expired within a year of enactment. The final version of the Senate's stimulus bill, based on a deal reached by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin does not include provisions on immigration. In negotiations with Republicans, Senator Schumer pushed to include language that would have automatically extended work authorizations in light of the closures, said an aide to Schumer. A source familiar with the negotiations said both Schumer and Senator Dick Durbin pushed the language, but it was rejected by Senate Leader Mitch McConnell's office with input from Republicans from the House Judiciary Committee. The source said a Department of Homeland Security official involved in negotiations called the provision a Graham-Durbin attempt to save DACA, referring to Senator Lindsey Graham, who in the past has supported measures to protect DACA recipients. The Treasury Department did not comment to the Hill. Still, whether or not stopgap measures are applied could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the applicants, but for critical sectors such as medicine, construction, tech, and agriculture. The thing that worries me most is all the essential workers in these fields. The number of doctors serving us now who are foreign nationals is large, and nurses and pharmacists, said Jadot. Think about nursing homes and nurses' aides, personal aides at home helping the elderly who are at very high risk, she added. Depending on how long USCIS remains shut down, the effects could be felt by millions of such workers. They include more than 1 million yearly applicants for legal permanent residency, also known as green card. USCIS also manages work permits for immigration programs including DACA and Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, which together grant permission to work and live in the United States to about 1 million people. According to the Institute of International Education, more than 1 million foreign students were enrolled in U.S. educational institutions in the 2018-19 school year. And nearly 1 million people lived in the country on temporary work visas as of 2018. That's 2018, sorry. According to a report by the Migration Policy Institute. USCIS has taken some measures to simplify filing forms online while minimizing contact between applicants, agency employees, and contractors. On Friday, for instance, USCIS announced it would admit electronic or photocopy signatures on the I-129, a form necessary for any work authorization, departing from its long-standing policy of requiring a wet or ink signature. Jadot said it's great for USCIS employees that the notoriously paper-based agency made that change, but it did little for attorneys and applicants, as the wet signature still has to be collected and filed. It's on them because they're still requiring the wet signature to be someplace, and that means it has to be collected, says Jadot. Attorneys still have to collect wet signatures and hold them, she added. Sorry about the dogs. I live in a neighborhood of dogs. There's dogs on every side of me, across the street, behind, and they're very outspoken in their desire to communicate to each other. So I apologize for the background chorus, but there's no stopping them. Once they get started, they just go back and forth till they're done. Okay, another story. This one entitled, Immigration Services Agency Seeks to Suspend Bargaining with Union Amid Coronavirus Outbreak. Officials with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services have informed the agency's union that management does not want to bargain over workplace policy changes because of the coronavirus outbreak, even though agency leaders already have the power to implement the changes unilaterally. During a national emergency, USCIS is able to make workplace policy changes without negotiating with the union, but the union is entitled to demand post-implementation bargaining to try to mitigate any negative impacts on employees. On March 13th, the American Federation of Government Employees Council 119, which represents about 13,000 USCIS employees, issued a demand to bargain over the agency's coronavirus response measures. Their proposal includes requiring the agency to post signs encouraging good hygiene, and that workers stay home when sick, timely COVID-19 testing for all employees, access to hand sanitizer and sanitizing wipes, and canceling all non-necessary agency-related travel. Excuse me. But on Wednesday, USCIS Labor and Employee Relations Chief Judy McLaughlin responded by proposing to suspend all post-implementation bargaining related to any agency actions taken in response to the coronavirus outbreak. McLaughlin said that instead, the agency would offer a weekly briefing and feedback session with union leadership. Quote, "The agency has acted swiftly in response to a voluminous amount of information often subject to change by the hour," she wrote. "The agency made several recent national scope decisions: suspension of face-to-face applicant services, closure of USCIS field offices, and mandatory telework that simply could not have been accomplished within the negotiated timeframes associated with traditional notice and bargaining." End quote. AFGE Council 119 President Daniel Spooner said demanding that the union waive its right to post-implementation bargaining is unacceptable, given that the union's collective bargaining agreement specifically calls for such bargaining during a national emergency. "Just because there's an emergency doesn't circumvent their obligation to negotiate with us," Spooner said. "We could have done this in the beginning of March, and we keep telling them that we're not their enemy, and we're not just trying to protect our people. The agency keeps talking about mission-critical issues, but the mission of USCIS at this point should be to keep their employees safe." Spooner said that although USCIS was one of the quicker agencies when it came to adopting mandatory telework for its employees, its actual implementation has been lackluster, since much of the agency's work still is done on paper. "The time in the office for us is solely dependent on which office we're in," she said. "The service centers were told to bring 2 to 3 weeks of work home, and the New York City offices have given the guidance as well, but the Houston office, for instance, said only take 3 days of work and then come back every 3 days just to drop off and pick up materials." And despite the mandatory telework, USCIS employees who interview ICE detainees for their asylum claims in some areas still are required to do that work face-to-face rather than over the telephone or via video chat. Spooner wrote a letter to USCIS objecting to its proposal, which she described as illegal and absurd, and she said she is conferring with the union's lawyers regarding possible steps. So here's yet another way that this virus is having an impact on immigration services. This is, an inside baseball sort of thing here, where the people who do the services are arguing with the other people who are in charge of the people who do the services about how they're supposed to do their jobs and things, but it is also a way that the virus is affecting what immigrants have to deal with and what kinds of services they can have access to, and how that whole process is going to work for them and for everybody else. And it's a mess all the way around, no matter how you look at it. Now, naturally, to be fair, this is an unprecedented situation. Oh, you like my shirt with the hole in the sleeve? This is an unprecedented situation. I mean, you cannot blame too many people for not having a really clear idea of how they were going to deal with it. That being said, the government is in charge of dealing and looking into and creating plans for all possible situations. So there should have been a contingency plan in place for something like this. And it wouldn't have been that hard to have some federal government-wide crisis plan that was for a pandemic, because that is one of the things that could possibly happen sometime, somewhere. And the fact that there really isn't, or if there is, it certainly was woefully inadequate, should come home to roost, let us say, with certain government officials who should probably not have their jobs after the end of their terms. But that being said, there's a lot going on, and there seemingly, from the list of stories, there is not a lot of intelligent response to it as of yet. The stimulus package was interesting. It doesn't compare at all with the similar packages in other countries that are going on right now, in terms of how it's taking care of people. But it was a start. And there have been a lot of fits and starts in the response. Most of what has been done seems to be to protect the economy. That is clearly the number one focus of this administration. People being a distant second, and people, immigrants being way, way down the list. I don't even know where on the list that they would fall. But it is something that we should all be concerned about, because it affects all of us. Those of us who work with immigrants and who care about their lives and situations, of course, we're going to be more conscious of it. But that doesn't mean that if you don't work with immigrants and aren't really caring much about them, that you shouldn't also be concerned, because particularly with a pandemic, of all the different kinds of things that can go wrong, we're only as strong as our weakest link. In terms of like social distancing, for example, I'm sitting here staying at home. Okay, fine. Anything that I might have or have had, I'm not spreading to anybody, because I'm not going anywhere. The occasional dog walk, I'm keeping far away from anybody, and I'm not touching anything while I'm out. So there's no way that I am spreading anything to anyone. But if I were not that responsible, or not in this situation, I might be going out. I might go, I'm bored here. I'm going to go to work and do some work there instead of here, just for a change of pace. And then I would be going and spreading whatever germs I might have, and or picking up germs from there. Germs meaning virus in this situation. And on it goes. So we have to care for each other. We should care for each other all the time. Let me put it that way. But we have to care for each other in times of crisis. So anyway, that's all the time I have for this week. I hope that you are staying well. Please stay home, and we'll see you later.